Imagine this. It's the 1800s, New England, and a silent, creeping horror is stealing through the homes of ordinary families. It's not a monster from a storybook. It's consumption. What we now call tuberculosis, and it was utterly terrifying. Because medicine had no answers. People would just waste away, slowly, and it seemed utterly random. One family member would fall, then another, and another. Now, when science fails, superstition rises from the grave to take its place. And here's where the real nightmare begins. People started to believe it wasn't a disease. They thought the first family member to die wasn't resting in peace. They believed the deceased had become a vampire, an undead monster, draining the life from their own living relatives from beyond the grave. Can you even imagine that fear? Watching your loved ones fade and blaming the one you already buried. So what did they do? They did the unthinkable. To save the living, they would dig up the dead. They would exhume the bodies of the suspected vampires. And as folklorist Michael Bell explains, this happened because, quote, consumption seemed capricious in choosing its victims. Survivors blamed early victims as vampires, responsible for preying upon family members. And the ritual to stop this terror, it was brutal. They would remove the heart and liver of the corpse and burn them. Often the family would even inhale the smoke, believing it was a cure. A final desperate act to break the curse. But this was no supernatural horror story. This was real panic. And the story of one family, the Browns, will show you just how far this fear drove people. Their case is perhaps the most chilling of all. So picture the scene. A dark, foggy New England village. A house shrouded in grief. Inside, a young woman is coughing up blood, her body wasting away from a fever no doctor can explain. This is the terrifying reality of consumption. It didn't kill quickly. It was a slow, agonizing thief that stole life breath by breath, person by person, within a single family. And that slowness, that was the key. It gave fear time to fester, to mutate. Because when a second person fell ill after the first had died, the human mind, desperate for an answer, made a terrifying leap. The dead must be preying on the living. But where did this specific idea of a vampire come from? This wasn't just born in a vacuum. This little-known fact is crucial. The panic was fueled by cultural beliefs immigrants brought from Eastern Europe. Stories of the undead, whispered in the old languages, found fertile ground in the scared, grieving soil of New England. The folklore crossed an ocean and took root. Now, imagine the sheer, paralyzing dread. Every shadowed grave became a place of horror. Every cough in the night wasn't just sickness. It was proof that a loved one, someone you buried with your own hands, had become a monster. This fear didn't just warp reality. It consumed it. And this belief wasn't just a spooky story. It led to a tangible, horrifying action. One family was about to become the most famous example of this panic. What they did next, you won't believe it. Faced with unimaginable fear, families performed the unthinkable. They exhumed their own relatives. Guided by superstition, they searched for signs of the undead. A fresh corpse or blood in the heart was all the proof they needed. These exhumations were often community events, sanctioned by local leaders who shared the same deep-seated fears. The ritual that followed was chilling, as recorded in the case of Mercy Brown in 1892. The heart and liver were burned. The ashes were made into tea. Edwin drank from the bitter brew, believing it would break the curse. The act of consuming these ashes was seen as the ultimate protection, transferring life force back to the living. Some communities took even more extreme measures, beheading bodies or burying them face down to prevent their return. There are even accounts of bodies being pinned to the ground with iron rods. This was desperate medicine born of terror, a tragic fusion of grief and folklore. But why specifically target the heart and liver? What ancient belief made these organs the focus of such rituals? The answer lies in medical theories about the body that persisted for centuries, and that's what we'll examine next. And so, we come to the case that captured a nation. Mercy Brown, Rhode Island, 1892. This wasn't some hidden secret ritual. This was the moment the vampire panic exploded into the national spotlight. After Mercy died from consumption, her brother Edwin became gravely ill. Desperate, their father George permitted the exhumation of his own daughter's body. What they found, or what they believed they found, seemed to confirm their worst fears. And so they performed the ritual. They burned her heart and liver, mixed the ashes with water, and made her sick brother Edwin drink it. They truly believed this bitter brew would break the curse. But here's the tragic truth that newspapers were starting to document. It didn't work. Edwin died just 2 months later. This fact was crucial. Local papers and even some medical professionals recorded these events, creating a stark contrast between fading folkloric beliefs and the budding light of scientific understanding. The Mercy Brown case became a sensation. It was reported in papers from the Providence Journal to the New York World. The entire country was suddenly riveted by this macabre drama from a small New England town. And this national attention didn't just report the story, it spread the fear. Similar rituals were inspired in towns across the region, each one hoping their ritual would be the one that worked. But this media spotlight also began the panic's end. Because now, everyone was asking the same question. If burning hearts doesn't work, then what actually causes consumption? The answer was closer than anyone thought, and it would change medicine forever. So what were these rituals truly? They weren't the acts of ignorant people. They were the desperate acts of terrified people. As one reflection perfectly captures, these exhumations were a way to try every possible remedy when science could offer none. When you're watching your family die one by one and doctors have no answers, you turn to what you know. Folklore, superstition, anything that offers a thread of hope. But then, a revolution. In 1882, Robert Koch discovered the tuberculosis bacterium. Germ theory began to spread, and suddenly, there was a real scientific explanation. The monster had a name, and it wasn't a supernatural vampire. It was a microscopic organism. Treatment slowly improved, and the terrifying rituals finally began to wane. The last burning pyres of these desperate rites faded as new medical knowledge dawned. Anthropologists now see these New England vampires not as reanimated corpses, but as powerful symbols. They were the physical manifestation of a persistent, unexplained illness that ravaged families. The vampire was grief, fear, and desperation, given a form that could, in their minds, be defeated. But here's what haunts me. Even as science provided answers, the ghosts of that fear never fully left. They linger in local lore, a permanent scar on New England's history. And it makes you wonder, what vampires do we fear today? What mysteries do we still try to solve with stories? Because the science isn't there yet. That's a question for another time. For now, let's wrap up this chilling chapter and look at the legacy these events left behind. So what are we left with after the last embers of those ritual fires cooled? We're left with one of the most fascinating chapters in American history. The New England vampire panic isn't just a spooky story. It's a powerful lesson. It reveals the brutal intersection of devastating disease, raw human fear, and the folklore that rushes in to fill the void of understanding. As folklorist Michael Bell brilliantly put it, these New England vampires were essentially microbes with fangs, deadly, invisible, and deeply feared. That quote says it all. They gave a face to a faceless enemy. They gave people a target for their rage and grief, something they could actually fight, even if that fight meant digging up a grave. This entire panic underscores a fundamental human need: to find meaning and control amid suffering and chaos. When science was silent, stories spoke. When doctors had no cure, rituals provided a semblance of action. It was a tragic, misguided, but utterly human response to unimaginable loss. This captivating chapter teaches us that behind every legend, there's often a very real human fear. These stories persist in our history books and local lore not because they're true, but because they're true to the human experience of fear. And that experience continues.